Whether it be garden hermits or ninjas, humans have a weird history of creating occupations for often peculiar or straight up ridiculous reasons. Occupations which played an important role in our past, but now seem, well, bizarre. So let's not waste any time and take a look into some of these jobs. The first, quite strange occupation is that of the priest hunters, from English and Irish history. These, well, bounty hunters, were employed and acted on behalf of the British or Irish governments, and were employed to spy on and hunt Catholic priests. But why and when did this become an occupation? During the 1500s, there was a well-developed tension between Protestants and Catholics, and when Elizabeth I, a Protestant, came into power, she would inevitably begin the prosecution of Catholics. And for the next 100 or so years, prosecution, primarily of priests, became harsher and harsher, from forbidding documents of the Pope to high treason and death. And although there isn't much information on the exact beginning of priest hunters, it became a pretty common occupation for citizens in search of some extra cash. This was due to the fact that information on who was harboring or where priests were staying was worth some pretty good money, which was paid out as bounties, incrementing based on what information was provided. This resulted in some pretty interesting methods citizens used to catch priests, such as posing as Catholics in an attempt to drive out a confession from a priest, to intercepting letters sent by the Pope to locate their whereabouts and meeting places. Further on, during the 1640s, we can find recorded examples of priest hunters joining forces to work more efficiently in pursuit of the bounties. Now that's some real bounty hunter activities. And surprisingly, priest hunting, despite having its roots in the Middle Ages, continued throughout the 1700s and 1800s, with the last example of a priest hunt being recorded in 1829, when 6 Irish citizens killed a pope for a £45 bounty. However, they did this after the Catholic Emancipation Act was passed, so the bounty hunters got no reward and killed a priest. But it is ridiculous that this occupation existed for close to 260 years. This is also part of the reason behind the priest holes, another interesting part of history. The next occupation is garden hermits. Yes, this was a real, quite strange occupation. Nowadays, to entertain the rich, there are jobs for yacht maintenance or private jet pilots. But what was the muse for 18th century rich people? Living garden gnomes, I guess. Garden hermits were people employed to dress as druids and lurk through the gardens of large estates. The occupation required the hermit to grow out their hair and not wash for literal years. Hermits lived within shacks in the woods or caves, often made specifically for them. And their role was literally just to be there, walking around, being mysterious and stuff. Some hermits were employed to not speak or hold conversation with anyone, and others to serve and entertain party guests. How you got employed for this? I have no idea. But here's an excerpt from a 1797 advertisement for a garden hermit. Quote, "The hermit is never to leave the place or hold conversation with anyone, for 7 years during which he is neither to wash himself or cleanse himself in any way whatever, but is to let his hair and nails on hands and feet grow as long as nature will permit them." Like what? But yeah, a real occupation and one that is rightly obsolete. The next occupation is baby farmers. This job might not be exactly what it sounds like, but is definitely still bizarre. This occupation existed primarily through the late Victorian era, and found the employee accepting custody of a child and looking after them for a periodic amount of time for reoccurring payments, or adopting the child for a lump sum payment. And although the purpose of this job was to look after the child, if the, well, employer opted on choosing the lump sum option, there was a decent chance that the child would be neglected or outright murdered, as well, the payment was already paid, which resulted in some child farmers adopting a bunch of children to exploit this flaw, which was a choice that benefited no one, as prosecution for this crime was serious, and often resulted in the death of the accused. On a better note, however, a thorough investigation of this occupation resulted in many infant protection laws, and although we still have daycares, this was also a job that was understandably weeded out of common occupations. The next occupation is toad doctors. This occupation was around from the 1700s to 1800s, and was the role of essentially a witch doctor. Their primary role was to cure scrofula, or the king's evil, which seems straightforward. During the era, people were heavily involved with employing doctors who boasted very random means. But toad doctors? Yeah, their fad was placing either a live toad or the leg of one in a sack and placing it around their patient's neck. Well, they can't complain if they're dead, so I presume they didn't get many angry returning customers. However, those who didn't believe in the treatment's properties made it very vocal. One example can be seen through the letter from the 1850s from H.J. Rogers, in which he states, quote, "The gullibility of the English public is wonderful. Can you believe that in enlightened England in the 19th century, there are people who could sit and listen to such palpable trash? Such, nevertheless, is the fact that the supposed doctor stated things that were both improbable and impossible. And the applause that he received from the assembled audience surprised me, and I exclaimed to myself, can these things be? Oh, and he was able to come to that conclusion after attending literally one medical lecture. The next and final occupation is that of the link boys. This occupation, which existed primarily within the 17th and 18th century, was the name for boys who were employed to light the path for pedestrians. The history of this occupation is due to the fact that long before we had street lamps, there was still a need for light when walking at night. The occupation consisted of young urchins and found the boys carrying lit wicks to paint the night sky for wealthier citizens, either by walking in front of them or beside their sedan chairs. However, this occupation did not come without controversy, as it was not unknown for boys to use their light to lure pedestrians into questionable areas and into the hands of thieves. And there you go. Now you know a little bit more about some strange occupations from our history. Thanks for watching. If you are interested in part 2 of this video, let me know by commenting below, liking, and subscribing for future videos.